So you want to know what the best multi-class options are in Baldur's Gate 3. Well, this video is going to be showing you exactly that. I'm going to be going through every single class combination and telling you what I think are the best multi-class combinations in Baldur's Gate 3, as well as the worst ones. You have a fully chaptered and timestamped video, so you can go to exactly the parts you want, and let's not waste any time and get right into it. So the first thing, guys, that I want to talk about before we talk about Barbarian is how you should be multi-classing in Baldur's Gate 3. This is a very important point. Let me use a classic example for instance. Let's say I wanted to be pairing my Barbarian with a Druid, which would be a pretty good combination. What I would want to be doing is I would want to be getting 4 levels in Barbarian and 8 levels in Druid, or 8 levels in Barbarian and 4 levels in Druid. I want to make this point at the very start of the video because this is extremely important so that you make sure that you get your 3 feats. If you don't know, you only gain a feat when you get up to 4 levels in a specific class. So that means if I did 3 levels in Barbarian, I did 3 levels in Druid, and then let's say I did 3 levels in Fighter, what I would end up getting is 0 feats at level 9. This is a real problem, guys. Do not be missing out on feats. They're one of the strongest things in the entire game. That means you want to be leveling up to level 4 in any class before you get another class. There's going to be some people that say, let's say like Fighter 10, Barbarian 2, or Barbarian 10, Fighter 2. They're going to be saying these really odd combinations, and they can be strong. I'm not going to lie. There is specific combinations that can utilize odd ratios other than this 4-4, 4-8 split. However, guys, I would not recommend it. As a general rule of thumb, definitely always do 4 to 8. So if you're multi-classing 3 times, you would do 4, 4, 4. If you're multi-classing 2 times, you would have 1 at 4 and 1 at 8. This is going to maximize your feats, guys, and it's going to help you out. So I just wanted to put this tip in there before we actually get into the main list. So we're going to be starting with the Barbarian. That's what we're going to be starting with, and we're going to look at all classes, how they pair with the Barbarian. So let's move the Barbarian up. I personally think the Barbarian is a very good multi-class option, and we're going to be starting the Barbarian with the Fighter. Barbarian Fighter is absolutely excellent. Like I said, this Barbarian 10, Fighter 2, Fighter 10, Barbarian 2. I've heard this multiple ways, guys. I've played around a little bit with the Barbarian Fighter. Basically, you could say the whole idea here is that the Barbarian has Rage and the Fighter has Action Surge. And that's basically the idea here. A lot of people go with the, I believe it's called Battle Master subclass for the Fighter. And that allows you to use superiority die as well. And basically use your extra action to enhance your main actions. So this is a great combination, guys. Barbarian's generally a very strong multi-classing option anyway, as you're going to be seeing with things like Barbarian Druid. But I just want to say, Barbarian Fighter, in my opinion, very good combination. Maybe top 10 in the game. Would highly recommend it, and I think it's a great option. Let's go on to Barbarian Druid. This is another really good one, guys. Barbarian Druid is actually super strong. This is called Barbarian, or like Barbarian. So what you can do is you can basically get Circle of the Moon for Druid, and you can actually pair that up with the Barbarian, basically turn into a bear, rage as a bear, and have a huge health pool, be able to heal up in your bear form, and be able to rage and deal outrageous damage. So Barbarian, as you can see, is already starting to earn its S rank. I think that it is very strong. And just like with Fighter, Druid synergizes really well with Barbarian. So it's a really good option. Now, I will say this in the game, guys. A lot of times, you're going to be finding stuff that just doesn't make sense. And one of them is like this Barbarian Bard. A lot of multi-class options are non-entities, and you'll see that throughout this video. In my opinion, Barbarian Bard makes no sense. Barbarian scales primarily... Excuse me, guys. Barbarian scales primarily with Strength and Constitution. Bard scales primarily with Charisma. This class synergy doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm sure you could make it work, but I would personally put it at like C or D tier. I would never really use Barbarian Bard, and I don't suggest you do either. Let's go on. Barbarian Cleric. What do I think about it? Barbarian Cleric is a pretty good idea. With Barbarian, you're going to be able to access your Rage, and Cleric gets a lot of support spells. It's definitely not the strongest combination in the game, and I wouldn't recommend it. But it could be strong, and I would put it at like maybe C or B tier. I don't think of many combinations that it actually really helps with, but being able to bless your barbarian, being able to help your party, if you want to be a frontline fighter that also just can heal himself and has a lot of utility, I think barbarian cleric is not the worst option, but it's definitely not the best. Now we're going to be moving on to barbarian monk. What do I think about barbarian monk? Well, monk is able to do extra actions and basically strike with the fist. Barbarians are able to rage. Barbarian monk, I think, will be a pretty strong option, guys. I would probably put it up in like the A tier. I think there's definitely a lot of synergies here, and I think there's a lot that you could really do with this build. I think this could go very, very light, and I see a lot of potential. I personally haven't tried it, but I think it would be pretty fantastic just on paper. Barbarian Monk, I would put probably around the A tier. So as you see here, Fighter already, we've had S tier. Druid, we've had S tier. Bard, basically don't have a multi-class with Barbarian. Doesn't make sense. Cleric, probably C, B tier. Monk, we're already having A tier. So you can kind of see why Barbarian's earning its reputation in the S plus tier. It's really good to multi-class. What about Barbarian Paladin? Another classic, guys. Barbarian Paladin makes a lot of sense. You get the rage from Barbarian. You get the Divine Smites from Paladin. Now you have even stronger attacks. This is really, really good. You could pair this up with like a feat and Great Weapon Master, and you would just be killing things so quickly. Multiclassing can be pretty broken in this game, and Barbarian Paladin, I would say, is either A or S tier. I would highly recommend it. I think you'll have a lot of fun playing this build. What else think was Barbarian Ranger? I say Barbarian Ranger makes literally no sense. I would never recommend it. Ranger is mainly going to be paired with things like the Rogue. I don't really think that, even though Gloomstalker does have some really strong synergies, you got to get up to level 5 primarily for that to work out. And Ranger with Barbarian, I wouldn't recommend. I would put it in the D tier. What do I think about Barbarian Rogue? Probably one of the worst options you could have. I mean, Barbarians basically is all about being in front, being loud, being seen, getting up in front of the action. Rogue is literally the diametric opposite of this. I can't see how these classes could be further apart. They also scale on completely different things. Barbarian specifically on strength and constitution. Rogue, the most important aspect you have is dexterity. So these are just really, really bad. Do not ever pair a Barbarian with Rogue. I think it will be an atrocious combination. Let's move on to Sorcerer. Sorcerer, there is a thought process in this game, and I've heard a lot from the community members, a lot of people smarter than myself, guys, that getting 1 to 2 levels in Sorcerer is just straight up good. Sorcerer is one of the strongest classes to actually multi-class with. The way sorcery points work, basically, that you can use a lot of spells. SorLock and things like that are going to do it way better. And we'll get to that when we get to the Warlock section. But Sorcerer is pretty strong with almost any class, but it's not really ideally used with Barbarian, and I would say a B or C tier is the best I could give it. Warlock, I don't really know why you would do Warlock with Barbarian. You do get Eldritch Blast, which is really, really nice, but ultimately, I think there's a lot better options with pairing it with Druid, with pairing it with Fighter. Barbarian, I wouldn't pair with Warlock. What do I think about Wizard? This is another one like Rogue that I just don't really understand from a conceptual basis why anybody would do this. You do get to learn spells from books, which is really, really nice. Wizards get a lot of spell slots, which is pretty cool. But most of the time you're going to be fighting up close where you're going to be getting disadvantage if you're casting spells, unless you're doing like Shocking Touch or some melee range spell. I would not pair this up, and I don't think it makes sense. So just to basically clarify, let's sum up Barbarian again. The ones I would highly recommend is pairing Barbarian with Fighter and Barbarian with Druid. I think these are the 2 strongest combinations for Barbarian, but Barbarian with Monk or Paladin would also be fairly good, although Paladin does scale with Charisma and Barbarian mainly scales with Strength. I think probably the 2 strongest is Fighter and Druid for Barbarian, and Barbarian deserves its S-rank multi-classing tier list. What do I think about Fighter? Most of what I say about Barbarian holds true for Fighter. I would say Fighter is probably a really strong, like, top A tier. combination in terms of multiclassing. So let's run through some of your options real quick. As I just mentioned, some of this is what was explained in Barbarian. Barbarian Fighter is a classic combination. You can do the 10-2 split, which I had already described in the Barbarian section. However, Fighter Barbarian is just fantastic because you get the action surge from Fighter and you get the rage from Barbarian. So classic combination, S tier, multi-class. So Fighter is really good. The reason I'm putting Fighter on A instead of S like Barbarian is that the Fighter does synergize a little bit less with some of these other classes, as we're going to get to. Fighter Druid, it's not as good as Barbarian. You do get the action surge, which is going to be really nice if you do something like, Circle of the Moon and you go Bear and then you actually use your Fighter to get extra swipes. Not bad. I would probably put it around the A tier. However, I do think Barbarian is just straight up better combination with Druid, so I wouldn't really recommend this because if you're going to do a Druid multiclass, I feel like Barbarian is by far better. So Fighter Druid, not bad, but not amazing. Fighter Bard, we talked about this with Barbarian Bard. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yes, you do. You can get proficiencies. Bard's really, really good to get proficiencies. But ultimately, proficiencies as Fighter or Barbarian probably aren't going to help you because you're going to be mainly, like if you're doing Fighter, you're going to probably be wearing heavy armor. If you're doing Barbarian, you may be unarmored. Getting proficiencies, I just don't really think it's going to make much sense, especially with Fighter where you already have proficiencies with so many weapons to begin with. What are you ultimately getting proficiencies in? So I wouldn't recommend Bard. Cleric, Fighter, I think this is a great classic combination. I think that Bless, I think that a lot of spells from the Cleric, healing spells, really, really good. You can do a lot of things. You could go Tempest Cleric to get lightning and thunder damage. The possibilities are endless. Cleric is a really, really good multi-classing option, and it pairs really well with Fighter. What I was saying about Fighter and Monk. Really good, guys. Really good. It's one of those things I would say Barbarian might scale a little bit better, but Monk, Fighter, really good. Again, Action Surge. Pretty much you can put Fighter and Action Surge is going to help almost every single class in the game. So Monk, really strong. I would say not top tier, maybe like B tier. What do I think about the Paladin mixed with the Fighter? Paladin mixed with Fighter is interesting, guys. The bad news is Fighter scales primarily off strength. Paladin scales primarily off charisma. The good news is Divine Smite is OP already, extremely OP. And now you have Action Surge, so you could theoretically cast 2 smites in a single turn. I think ultimately Paladin is just an incredibly good class. You also get access to heavy armor like the Fighter. So you're going to be wearing really, really tanky armors, and it's just going to be an amazing, amazing class. You could go with feat, like you could go Great Weapon Master here and just absolutely smash people, get Action Surge. It's really strong, guys. Fighter, Paladin, really good. I would probably put it in the S tier. I think it's a very good combination. Fighter, Ranger. So what you can do here is you can go up to Gloomstalker at level 5 and you can basically get extra actions and then you can get Action Surge. So you could probably attack quite a few times a turn. The problem is, guys, and one thing I want to note is because you're splitting levels in the multi-classes, you have to also think how this is going to influence your leveling up process. How is it going to be? So a lot of people will look at a class and they'll say, well, this is the best thing at level 12, but they don't actually think about the leveling up experience. So unless you're in the end game and you're just respeccing, it's not going to be a great experience leveling up. I wouldn't recommend Fighter, Ranger. I don't think it has a lot of synergies and doesn't make a lot of sense. Fighter, Rogue. Rogue is one of those classes that only really multi-classes well with a couple things. Fighter's kind of being out there on the front line. Rogue is about being in the shadows, basically doing sneak attacks. I wouldn't really pair Rogue up with Fighter too much. You do get extra. Rogue does allow you to have a lot of utility in terms of extra actions, which you could pair up with like a Battle Master or something. There is definitely some combinations you could do here that wouldn't be terrible. One thing I want to just note, particularly about multiclassing in general, is that there's a lot of things that are very niche, and if you do things exactly right, you can make a lot of things overpowered in this game. But just in terms of general viability, I wouldn't be ranking the Fighter with the Rogue very well, probably around C tier. What do I think about the Fighter with Sorcerer? like I've said in the Barbarian section, and I just kind of want to reiterate here, Sorcerer is one of the best classes that you can multi-class with. There's a lot of utility. A lot of people say it's broken, especially with things like Warlock. But Sorcerer Fighter wouldn't be the worst thing. You do have access to spells, which is really, really nice. I think it's probably better than Wizard if you want to actually get some spells on your Fighter. But I think it's a little bit worse than Cleric. So in my opinion, Fighter Sorcerer would probably be around in the B tier. I don't think it's fantastic, but I don't think it's terrible. Now we go on to Warlock. You get Eldritch Blast. This does give you a little bit of a range option. You do get limited spells. I really don't know why you would choose Warlock when you could probably choose Cleric, and it makes a lot more sense. I wouldn't pair Fighter with Warlock. I just don't think on paper it makes a lot of sense. I haven't tested this out too much, but I really don't think it would be that great. What about Fighter Wizard? Fighter Wizard is another one of those trash combinations, guys, that I don't think makes any sense on paper. I did play around. I memed around with it just a little bit, and I felt that it was really, really bad. That's what I want to say. And this is one of those ones I would put don't ever multi-class. I think Fighter Wizard just doesn't make a lot of sense at all. So let's now move on to the Druid. So we're going to be putting the Druid up. The Druid, I would say, is a pretty solid. I would probably put it in B tier because I think it has very strong combinations, but maybe not as many of them. So Druid, let's go over what I think. Druid Barbarian, I've already talked about this. Druid Barbarian is extremely good. So yeah, I've already spoken about this. If you want to look at it, go into the Barbarian section. I talk about it. But yeah, Druid Barbarian, solid S tier combination. Druid Bard. Druid Bard does actually have some things that I could say would be good about it. Druid Bard is definitely one of those combinations that I could see getting the extra proficiencies would be good. Getting the Cleric like buff spells would be good. I don't think it's super strong. I would probably put it in B tier, just like the Druid itself. But I don't think it's totally bad either. And I could see some really strong synergy to it. If you keep the 4 ratio, like if you do, let's say 4 in Druid or 8 in Druid and 4 in Bard, I could see this class working out. It's definitely one of the more interesting combinations, and I may actually do a video on this because it does intrigue me, some of the synergies that you could have. What do I think about Druid and Cleric? Cleric, guys, is just a really strong multi-classing option in general. I think Cleric is pretty much good with any melee fighter, simply because you get so much more utility. You give up some of your raw damage for just a lot more utility. I would put Cleric as being quite good with the Druid, probably in a B or A tier when you're actually combining them. But I would get more levels in my Druid and just get 4 levels in Cleric. That's my opinion. What about the Monk? Druid Monk. I just don't think this makes a lot of sense, guys. I mean, you do get unarmored attacks, like Monk it does benefit off this, so you could potentially mix that with the Druid. But Druid, you're primarily in animal form anyway. I just don't think this has super strong synergy. I also believe Monk scales off Dexterity, if I'm not incorrect there. Druid, Monk, I just haven't heard many people talk about this. When I was actually researching this video, I also looked a lot on like Reddit. I looked on other people's videos. I really tried to educate myself and, give you the best content you can have. Druid Monk, I just don't think it's going to be too good. I've heard nobody talking about it, and I just don't think on paper it makes any sense whatsoever. So I would say don't ever multi-class. Druid Paladin. I think this could be quite good with the Divine Smites. Paladin generally just mixes well with things in general, but as you see, Druid being stuck in B tier, it just has a little bit less utility. Druid has some very strong combinations. I think Druid Fighter is really good, and I think Druid Barbarian is really good. But ultimately, the Paladin, not a great option. Now, I don't know if I had said this earlier, but Druid Fighter, I do think is very good. With Druid basically being able to have a huge health pool and regenerate health, and then you have the Fighter where you're actually having action surge. I think Druid Fighter, quite good. Now we're going to go on to Ranger. Don't do it, guys. It makes no sense. Druid Ranger. These classes kind of just are fundamentally opposite. You're going to have people in the comments saying, but Gloomstalker. Yes, Gloomstalker is good. Yes, Gloomstalker is quite OP in some certain cases, but there's a lot better options you can mix that with. Don't mix it with Druid. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What about Rogue? I don't know what to say, guys. Why would you mix this with Rogue? Druid, Rogue, it just makes no sense on paper. It's just one of those things that both classes are trying to do totally different things. They scale off totally different attributes. I think this is in the absolute trash tier. Don't ever multi-class. I would never multi-class a Druid with a Rogue, and I don't think you should either. What about Druid and Sorcerer? Now we're getting interesting, guys. We've already talked about Sorcerer and how well it mixes with the other classes. I definitely think that this could be a very cool combination with the sorcery points and just getting spells. As a Druid, you gain a little bit more utility. You don't now always have to be in your animal form. You could actually be casting spells in your human form. Sorcerer's pretty good, guys. Sorcerer's pretty good, and I think it will match pretty well with Druid. I would probably put this combination either in the B tier or the A tier. I think there's a lot of potential here. Warlock, I would say, is pretty much the same situation we have with Sorcerer. You're going to get Eldritch Blast, which is allowing you to attack from distance, which is really good. Eldritch Blast, generally as a cantrip, is one of the best cantrips in the game. I really like it. I do think, honestly, that Druid Warlock is not terrible, but it's not God tier, and I wouldn't specifically make a video about it. But if you want to do it, guys, I think it's solid. I would probably put it in a solid B tier. So Druid Warlock, not the worst. What about Druid Wizard? Druid Wizard, guys, is probably weaker than Sorcerer and Warlock. Wizard, I wouldn't say gives you too much. You are able to learn spells, which could be good. So I would say if you're doing this, Druid Wizard, you're probably trying to go into a very utility-focused class where you're trying to basically learn a lot of spells and, be able to solve a lot of situations outside of combat. With Druid also having more utility, being able to talk to animals, being able to do things like that, I think there could be some synergy here. I think it's probably like a B tier class combination in terms of multi-class. And as you see, guys, that's kind of what Druid is in itself. He has a few very strong combinations like Barbarian and Fighter, and then he has a few medium combinations like Paladin and let's say Warlock or Sorcerer. And then he's got a lot of bad combinations, like with the Bard or the Rogue or the Ranger, that kind of thing. So let's move on. What do I think about Bard? This is going to be a divisive opinion, guys. This is a hot take. I don't like Bard. I'm sorry. I don't like Bard, and I'm putting it in C tier. The reason that I don't like Bard is that I really feel like as a support class, a lot of other champion class do better than Bard. And I know this is a hot take. I know people love Bard, but I'm just going to say it right now. This isn't Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is Baldur's Gate 3, which is a modification. In-game, I just haven't been impressed with Bard. I have rolled several Bards, and I have not been impressed. But let's go over what I think about each class combination. Bard, Barbarian. Bard, Barbarian is a tough one, guys. I don't really see much synergy here. Yes, you can do some buffs to your Barbarian with your Bard spells. I definitely think if you did this, you would do 8 in Barbarian and 4 in Bard. But I don't think it's good, guys, and I wouldn't recommend it. What do I think about Bard and Fighter? Bard and Fighter, I think, makes a lot more sense if you go College of Swords and then pair it with Fighter. I could really see this like 8 Fighter, 4 Bard. This is probably pretty strong. I would probably put this up in the A tier list. I think Bard's probably one of his best combinations is actually with Fighter. What do I think about Bard and Druid? This is kind of like Cleric, but just not as good. I think Cleric just generally as a support or utility class is much better than Bard. And I wouldn't really recommend this. I think Bard, Druid just doesn't really have that much synergy in my opinion. And the problem is with Bard, a lot of the multi-classes, I just don't think they're too hot with Bard. And that's basically my thought with Bard, Druid. What do I think about Bard, Cleric? This is interesting, guys. This might be like an A tier list. I think Bard Cleric, if you're going just a pure utility, let's say you gain a lot of proficiencies with Bard, which you can do from one of the colleges, and then you go into Cleric and you're just a master of utility, you could kind of be a master of a lot of different things, kind of a jack of all trades character. So I'd probably put Bard Cleric at maybe like the A tier. I think this would probably be one of the better options you have with Bard. What do I think about Bard and Monk? I think Bard Monk is quite good because Monk, you already get extra bonus actions. You're able to, hit people with your bare hands. With some of the utility spells of Bard, I could see it being not super bad. And I would recommend it probably around B tier. What about Paladin? Where are we at with Paladin? Paladin, I think, is a fairly good combination with Bard. Mainly because Paladin just has heavy army proficiency. You're already in the front line. You're a tank. I think it's probably better to pair Bard with Paladin than it is Barbarian. Simply because also too, this Paladin really does help with spell slots. So any utility caster like the Bard could be quite good. And I think Paladin Bard is a strong combination. I would probably put it at B tier. I don't think it's the best combination with Bard, but I don't think it's the worst. What about Bard and Ranger? Bard and Ranger is, I think, a poop tier, don't ever multi-class. I don't think this makes much sense, and I just really don't think that this is going to have much synergy. It's going to be kind of boring. These two classes want to do completely different things. They scale on completely different attributes. Here you're talking about being a class that's mainly charisma-based with the Bard, wants to talk its way out of situations. And in the Ranger, you want to basically, hit things from afar, deal damage without being seen. It's going to really combine better with the Rogue, which we'll talk about when we get there. I don't think this makes much sense. Bard Ranger, poop tier, wouldn't do it. Bard Rogue. Same thing we talked about Ranger. I think these classes are huge diametric opposites. They really want two different things. I really don't think this is a great option, and let's move on. I just think this is really bad. Bard Sorcerer. Now we're getting into some interesting combinations. I would say Bard Sorcerer would be very good. I would put it up in the A, maybe the S tier list. I think Bard, with all of its utility spells, and Sorcerer with its high damage output and sorcery points, I could see some broken combinations happening here. I think Bard Sorcerer could be very, very strong. And I would recommend it. I think it's a very good multi-classing option. What about the Warlock? The Warlock with Bard is a pretty cool combination. I think Warlock is one of those ones very much like Sorcerer that can kind of help a lot of classes. And I think the synergy on Bard Warlock would be pretty good. I could see with the utility spells of Bard and the actual damage output with the Eldritch Blast, Agonizing Blast, a lot of the reactions of Warlock, I think this could be quite good, and I would pretty much recommend it. I would put Warlock Bard at probably like either the B or A tier. I like it a lot. What do I think Bard with Wizard? Not as good as Warlock, not as good as Sorcerer. The problem is when you get with Wizard is intelligence is just a terrible, terrible dump stat. It really sucks. Intelligence is bad. I was thinking about making a video just about this. Intelligence is bad. It's one of the worst stats in the game. Don't pair a Wizard with a Bard. I just don't think it makes much sense. Probably in D tier or don't ever multi-class. So now let's move on to the Cleric. So I've already talked a lot about the Cleric, guys. I'm going to be putting the Cleric in S tier for multi-classing. The reason I'm putting it in S tier is because you have a lot of potential combinations. I'm going to be listing those off pretty quickly, but a lot of these I've already talked about before. So I'm going to just, refer you to those things. So if you want to learn about Cleric Barbarian, go to the Barbarian section. If you want to go to the Cleric Fighter, go to the Fighter section. Druid, onwards and onwards. Let's now talk about some of these other ones. Cleric Monk. Monk, I think, would be a really good combination with Cleric. I think just like Cleric having a lot of really strong situations, Cleric Monk, really, really good. I would probably put it up there on A tier, because Cleric really buffs all melee classes. So Barbarian, Fighter, Druid, Monk, Paladin, anybody that front lines could really benefit from Cleric. You can go Tempest Domain Cleric, which is really, really cool, and I think would have a lot of synergy. But just Cleric, you could go Life Domain. There's a lot of things you could do here. What I would do is probably go 4 levels in your main attribute, so like Monk. So you would go 4 levels of Monk, then you would go 4 levels of Cleric, and then you would probably finish out with 4 levels of Monk. Just getting those 4 levels in Cleric, you're going to gain a ton of utility, and I think it's a very, very strong option. What about the Cleric and Paladin? Really good, guys. Paladin is already a frontline fighter. You're going to get tons of utility with the Cleric. Paladin's already one of my favorite classes in the game. I think the Paladin Cleric combination is extremely good, and if you want to see this in action, you can go watch my 4 video, where I basically do a Dark Urge 4 God of Lightning, God of Thunder build, and I pair Paladin with Cleric, and I can tell you from personal experience, strong, guys, very strong. Now we're going to go on to Ranger. Would not do it. Don't see any synergy. Ranger is one of those ones. Rogue and Rangers, they don't have that greatest synergy with a lot of other classes. They do get bonus actions. That's good. Gloomstalker is good. People are going to be already writing in the comments. I know it. Like, but Gloomstalker. Yes, Gloomstalker is good. Would not pair it with Cleric. I think it's bad. Low Cleric. Another one like Ranger. You've probably already heard my thoughts here. It's not good. Don't ever multi-class. Definitely either in the D or in the F. Don't ever multi-class rank. I just don't think these classes make a lot of sense when you have a melee-oriented class that's in the front line, and these classes are about being in the shadows and striking and doing sneak attacks. Don't pair these up. What do I think about Sorcerer with Cleric? Sorcerer Cleric could be interesting. I wouldn't put it at the highest rank. I haven't heard many people talk about it. Excuse me. I have not seen it in action too often. Wouldn't recommend it, but it is interesting just from a kind of theoretical perspective. But I just think that there's so many better options that, yes, you could make a niche theoretical build work out, but you have so many options that are just strong and proven. Unless you really want to play around with it, I don't think making Cleric go along with Sorcerer is that great. Cleric, Warlock, not bad, guys. Cleric, Warlock, I think probably would be one of the stronger mage options. Because with Cleric, you can hit some melee. Warlock, you have Eldritch Blast. You have a lot of utility. This is kind of if you want to be a buff man. Just like we talked about kind of with Cleric and what would be Cleric Bard. You know, you have a super utility-oriented build. This is kind of what I would say. You do have some strikes from range. You can hit up close with Cleric. Not a bad combination, guys. Not amazing. Probably B tier. What do I think about Cleric with Wizard, guys? Cleric Wizard could be fun. I think just like Sorcerer and Warlock, it suffers from the problem about not being very focused. Another problem is that anything you're pairing with Wizard... Sorry, guys, my voice is giving out a little bit. This is a long video. Cleric Wizard. I don't think it's very good, primarily because Wizard has the dump stat of Intelligence. It's just not very strong, guys. Intelligence is kind of a bad stat to begin with. So I wouldn't really recommend matching up the Cleric with Wizard, and I would probably put it like in the D tier. Let's move on, guys. What do I think about the Monk? The Monk is really strong. Like, I'm going to probably put it like probably very close to Fighter here in A tier. So let's go. We already talked about some combinations. We talked about like Monk Barbarian. We talked about Monk Cleric. We talked about Monk Fighter. I'm just going to say Monk Fighter is probably, I think, Monk's best combination. With the action surge, with a lot of the bonus actions you can do with Monk. Monk Fighter would be what I recommend. Probably like, probably 8 in Monk, 4 in Fighter, or something of that nature. I think it would be really strong. Barbarian, really good with Monk. Cleric could definitely synergize with Monk. Druid, Monk, really good. As you see, Monk has a lot of combinations that are good. I think Druid, this is an interesting one. What do I think about Monk Druid? Monk Druid's good. What do I think about Monk Bard? Bard would not be the best with Monk. I think there's just not a lot of synergy here. I think that it really isn't that good. And yeah, I would avoid it. What do I think about Paladin? Monk Paladin could be really strong. I would probably put this in the A tier or S tier. With the Divine Smites, with the unarmored, melee attacks, basically. I guess having no weapon attacks, unarmored attacks. That's what I wanted to say. Unarmed attacks. Of Monk, I think it could be good. The problem is Paladin has heavy armor as one of its like specializations. Basically, heavy armor is what you're kind of intended to run as a Paladin. So I don't think it would be amazing with Monk, but I could see some broken things here. I do think Monk has a lot of options in terms of what you could go to, but I would probably put Monk with Fighter. I think that's probably one of the best options. Or like Monk with Druid, I think would be another great option. Now we're talking about these tiers that, these classes that probably have like one or two amazing combinations and a couple weaker combinations. What do I think about Monk and Ranger? We've talked about Ranger and Rogue quite a bit here. They just don't pair well with a lot of these classes. Yes, Gloomstalker, you're going to get that. That could be good, but Monk, Ranger, scales off different things. Well, Monk Ranger wouldn't be the worst. I really want to think about this, and I want to, be fair. I don't think Monk Ranger would be the worst, but I don't think it would be the best. So let's move on to Rogue. I would probably put Monk Ranger at like B tier, in my opinion. What do I think about Monk Rogue? Monk Rogue, I think, could be very good because you're already getting the bonus actions from the Monk in terms of bonus extra actions. And then you can actually get a Rogue, which also has this in the class. I also think that both of these classes, like if you go, I believe it's called the Shadow Monk specialization, and then you go the Assassin of Rogue, this could have some very strong synergy. I could really see Monk Rogue working out, and I would probably put it in the A tier or the S tier. I think these classes feel very good together, and I would recommend this. I think Monk Rogue makes a lot of sense. What do you think about Monk Sorcerer? Almost all the spellcasters are kind of going to have the same advantages and the same disadvantages. Sorcerer is quite good in of itself, and it could help the Monk because you do have some range options, just like Warlock. But I wouldn't say this is great. I would probably put it in C tier. I think Monk Sorcerer is just kind of a little bit meh. I do think there's a lot better options if you're going with Monk in a multi-class. What do I think about Monk Warlock? Warlock is just quite good with Eldritch Blast. This does give you a strong range option, which I think you need to note. I think that's really, really good with Monk because Monk is mainly a melee class and doesn't have many range options. So I think getting that Eldritch Blast, getting maybe Misty Step, getting some utility from the Warlock could be quite good. So I think Warlock would be a strong, maybe B or A tier combination. Definitely not S tier, but strong. Monk Wizard, we've already talked about the problem wizards have. Intelligence is a terrible stat in Baldur's Gate 3. It's probably the worst stat in the game. So I don't think Wizard is probably going to be your best option. I do think that there's definitely some problems with this, and I wouldn't recommend going Monk Wizard. Let's move on to Paladin. Now, a lot of what I've said about Paladin, I've already talked about. Paladin, I'm going to put right here in the S tier. I've already talked about Paladin Barbarian in my Barbarian section. I've talked about Cleric in my Cleric section. Talked about it with Monk. Talked about it with Fighter, Druid, Bard. So I don't want to reiterate all of these things. If you want to hear about them, go to the relevant sections in these class guides. So I'm going to be starting Paladin with Ranger. However, I want to say this, and I want to note this, that specifically Paladin, I feel like pairs extremely well with Fighter. I think I'm going to be giving you what I think are the several best options you have with Paladin. And that is, I believe Paladin pairs extremely well with Fighter and extremely well with Barbarian. I think these are probably the two single best multi-class options for Paladin. However, Paladin is a class that multi-classes very well with a lot of classes, and we're going to be talking about that. So let's go on to Paladin Ranger. Don't have a multi-class. I think this doesn't make a lot of sense. Ranger, I'm not a big fan of it. I know people are going to hate me in the comments. I think Ranger is the worst class in the game. Yes, it can multi-class well with certain other classes, specifically Rogue. But I just don't really like Ranger, and I think it's bad. So yeah, Paladin Ranger out. Paladin Rogue. Yes, you get bonus extra actions. That's something nice. You can maybe get to level 3 in Rogue and then push it to level 4. And what I would do is maybe take the Assassin so you could do really high base burst damage on your first turn. The problem would be getting inside, but that's kind of another problem you have is that this just conceptually the Paladin and the Rogue. Imagine this, guys. Paladin, you're this virtuous knight that's trying to, embody all these godly principles, all these holy principles. Rogue, you're skulking around, you're a cut purse, Do these two sound like they make sense together? I don't think so. I think Paladin Rogue kind of sucks. Yes, there is some things you could do with it, but I just don't think it's great. What do I think Paladin Sorcerer? Paladin Sorcerer is quite good. I think Sorcerer is pretty good with a lot of classes. I think definitely you could make this work with the sorcery points. You get more spell slots. Anybody that gives you more spell slots, like Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard, that's going to allow you to do more smites, guys, divine smites. So I really think these make a lot of sense. I would put probably the Paladin Sorcerer probably an S plus tier. I think it's very good. What do I think about Warlock? Basically, same thing I said about Sorcerer, Eldritch Blast, and you can actually get Eldritch Blast to actually have a knockback as well. Just being a frontline fighter, having Warlock, more divine smites, with Warlock. I think this could be really good. Warlock Paladin, I think it's a classic combination. You're basically empowering all your spell slots and getting more smites off. Really good. I would put it in S plus tier. I think Paladin, as you can see, multi-class is very well. Really good. Of the spellcasters, even though you can use the spell slots of Wizard, I think Wizard makes the least sense, and the reason why is that it's a charisma-based class, so that doesn't... it's a intelligence-based class instead of a charisma-based class, and intelligence is a very poor stat. The big advantage here would be you could basically learn spells from scrolls, but it doesn't make up for it. If you're playing Paladin and multiclassing, why would you not pick Sorcerer or Warlock, which I think are the two much stronger options? Or maybe even Cleric, which I had talked about before, being, I think, a really, really strong utility option. I wouldn't do Paladin Wizard at all. Let's move on to Ranger. So Ranger, guys, okay. Ranger's going to be in the B tier, and I'm going to be probably lambasted for this, but I want to say why I think this is the case. Let's just move through Ranger really quick. I think I can do Ranger in probably a minute tops. So Ranger, what do I think Ranger Barbarian? Sucks. What do I think Ranger Cleric? Sucks. What do I think Ranger Paladin? Sucks. What do I think Ranger Monk? Could be good. What do I think Ranger Fighter? Really good. I think Ranger Fighter makes probably the most sense and probably one of the best other than Rogue. So I think Ranger Fighter with the action surge off Fighter, with the extra attack that you're getting off Ranger Gloomstalker, I think this could be a really good way to initiate fights, and I think Ranger Fighter would be really strong. What do I think about Ranger with Rogue? This is the classic combination, guys. Pair up Ranger with Rogue, go either 8 Ranger for Rogue or 8 Rogue for Ranger. This is probably the best combination in the game. They synergize super well with each other. They cover up each other's weaknesses, and they both kind of utilize the same playstyle. So Ranger Rogue, definitely S plus tier. I would say this is probably the best thing you can do with your Ranger is pair it with Rogue. Highly recommend. What do I think about Ranger with Sorcerer? Another nonsensical combination. I don't think you gain much from here. Sorcerer is great to pair with most classes, but Ranger is just one of the worst classes in the game. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense, and I would put it in the don't ever multiclass tier list here. In the don't ever multiclass. What do I think about Ranger with Warlock? Warlock is another one that I think just doesn't pair well with Ranger. Now, the good thing about Warlock that I could say is I could see you using your bonus action, maybe your Gloomstalker, and then you go Warlock and you just hit people from range with Eldritch Blast. Maybe you go 8 Warlock and you go 4 Ranger. So I could kind of see this being good. I don't think it's terrible. I definitely think it does have some utility, and I think it's not a bad option, but it's not a god tier option. What do I think about Ranger with Wizard? We've already described all the problems with Wizard. Wizard has a lot of flaws in the game. Even though I love Gale, I love Wizards, I love being a spellcaster. Low HP pool, you know, what are you really getting? Why is Ranger benefiting from being paired with Wizard? Wouldn't recommend. I think it's a bad option, and I would probably put the Ranger Wizard as don't ever multiclass. So that's it, guys. Let's move on to Rogue now. So we're going to say Rogue. I'm going to put Rogue in the D tier, guys. I'm going to put Rogue in the D tier. Now, I've already talked about a lot of these. Let me sum this up really quick. Rogue Barbarian. Already talked about in the Barbarian section. Bad. Rogue Cleric. Already talked about in the Cleric section. Bad. Rogue Paladin. You already know it in the Paladin section. Not good. Rogue Monk. With the extra actions and stuff, I think this could be actually good. I think Rogue pairs well with Monk, well with Fighter, and well with Ranger. I think all three of these make a lot of sense. So if you would be pairing up the Rogue, I would say definitely go Ranger, which is your best option and probably S plus tier. You could go Monk, which is quite strong and, a good option. Or you could go Fighter, which is probably the second best option. Honestly, if you're doing Rogue and you want to pair it with something else, probably Ranger and Fighter are your two best options. Fighter, you get the action surge, and Ranger, you get the natural synergy with how Gloomstalker is going to work with the extra actions, extra bonus actions of Rogue. Really good combination. Now we're going to be looking at the classes we haven't put in the tier list yet. Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. I would say Rogue pairs fairly well with all three of these classes. Rogue, Sorcerer, I think would be quite good. The bonus actions could definitely come into play. You're definitely going to be playing a keep away game with all three of these classes, playing primarily as a spellcaster. So in all of these, I would do 8 in Sorcerer, 8 in Warlock, 8 in Wizard, and then just basically go and put in I would put in 4 in Rogue. I wouldn't do primarily Rogue. I wouldn't do 8 in Rogue and then do 4 in these. But I do think it's quite strong, and I think Rogue Sorcerer is quite good. Warlock, I probably like Warlock better than Sorcerer. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's stronger. I'm just saying I think Eldritch Blast is really good. It has a lot of reactions that deal damage. Yeah, it's just good. Rogue Warlock, I would probably put in either the B tier or the A tier. And I think Rogue Warlock is quite strong. Wizard, we've already talked about it. In terms of multiclassing, because of intelligence, because of how bad it is, not a good option, guys. I would probably put it in like C tier. It's not don't ever multiclass. You could definitely make a Rogue Wizard work, but it's not a good option, guys. It's definitely not a good option. Now we're going to be talking about Sorcerer. I'm going to just put Sorcerer into S plus tier. The reason I want to say this, guys, is because Sorcerer pairs well with almost every other class of the game. You can make it work with almost anything. The strongest synergy that you're going to have with Sorcerer, we're going to be talking right away. You've probably already heard about this broken build, Sorcerer Warlock. Because of the sorcery points and how many spell slots you can have, because of Warlock and Agonizing Blast, Sorcerer Warlock SorLock is one of the strongest classes in D&D and one of the strongest classes in Baldur's Gate 3. This is a great way to play the game. We've already talked about Sorcerer in these parts of the video: Barbarian, Cleric, Paladin, Monk, Fighter, Druid, Ranger, Bard, Rogue. We've already talked about how Sorcerer pairs up with them, so I don't want to basically just duplicate that because that would be basically the same thing. So if you're wondering about that, just go to the relevant part in the video for these classes. But Sorcerer, Warlock, classic combination, amazingly strong. Sorcerer, just across the board, guys, you almost can't go wrong with putting Sorcerer with almost any class in the game. It's really good. Sorcerer pairs very well and gives a little something extra to a lot of classes. So I think it's quite good. So we've already talked about Warlock. Now we're going to talk about Wizard. I probably think Sorcerer Wizard is definitely a lot weaker than Warlock. And we've already talked about the problems with Wizard, primarily being intelligence-based. I think this makes it probably one of the weaker options. I wouldn't say it's bad. I think Sorcerer Wizard is probably like still B tier, but it's just not as good as a lot of other options, and definitely not as good as Sorcerer Warlock. So if you want to do 2 mage classes, why would you do Wizard when you could just do Warlock Sorcerer? That's basically my opinion. So now we're going to be talking about Warlock. Warlock, I would probably put in the A tier list. I think it pairs very well with a lot of classes, but maybe not as well as Sorcerer. I've already talked about it, all of these classes in the relevant parts of the video, so I don't want to just duplicate. We're going to be talking about how Warlock matches with Wizard, which is not well, specifically because, like I said, they scale off 2 completely different attributes, Warlock being Charisma, Wizard being Intelligence. You do get to learn spells from Wizards, which is kind of cool, from like scrolls. I just don't think this is super, super good. You're already getting access to spells with Warlock. Warlock, a lot of the spells you get access to are just, you can pick the good spells of Wizard anyway. So why do you want to multi-class with Wizard? What are you gaining? They scale off different attributes. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I would probably put this in like C tier or D tier. I just don't understand the appeal of the Warlock Wizard combination. So now we're gonna get to the Wizard guys, and I'm sad to say, but he's gonna be the only one at the bottom of the tier list. Wizard scales pretty bad with almost every other class in the game. I've already talked about it in the relevant parts of the video, so this guy is going to be the shortest. But let's just sum up what Wizard does well. Wizard is a long-range spellcaster. He has very low HP, but he has one of the highest ranges in the game. And once you get him up, Wizard is a scaling choice. He's not very good in, let's say, level 1 through 4, but as he gets deeper and deeper in the game, some of the spells are extremely strong that you can cast with Wizard. I would probably put Wizard Cleric. I think is probably one of the best combinations. I think Wizard Cleric could be somewhat good. Wizard Bard could be a good utility option, I suppose. I think Wizard Sorcerer could be quite good, and I would probably put that up there in like B or A tier. But ultimately, Wizard just doesn't multi-class super well, and I wouldn't recommend it. So guys, this has been an absolutely mammoth video. In summary, I wanted to tell you about a couple of the classes that I think are amazing to multi-class with, and probably some of the ones you should give a chance, which is my first recommendation is doing Barbarian Fighter. I think Barbarian Fighter, if you just want to beat the game, if you want to multi-class but in the simplest way possible, do Barbarian Fighter. A lot of people recommend the 10-2 split. I'm recommending the 8-8-4 split. This is for feats. Your mileage may vary. You have to make that personal decision yourself. I think Barbarian Fighter makes a lot of sense. I think Paladin Cleric is another really, really good combination. I think Paladin Cleric is a great multi-class, and the Paladin is so strong. The Cleric is so strong. I'm doing a 4 build guide, which you should definitely go check out for God of Lightning and Thunder. When you have Paladin and Cleric, you can basically go into Tempest Cleric, and you can have lightning damage, and you can get lightning weapons, and it's just absolutely awesome. It's super cool. SorLock, guys, if you want to play a ranged character, probably Sorcerer, Warlock is the strongest option in the game. There's so many build guides out there for this. This is a well-known combination in D&D as well as Baldur's Gate 3. Really good. SorLock is probably one of your best distance option. And then probably if you want to do a stealth character, Ranger Rogue is your best option for that. I think these pair extremely well and are definitely in the S+ tier when combined together. So, Ranger Rogue, I would recommend 8 Ranger for Rogue. But again, your mileage may vary, and that's something you need to choose for yourself. I hope this video was helpful, guys. I put a lot of work into it. I tried to research it as well as possible. I definitely missed some things. I definitely am not perfect, but I do my best. And I try to give you this content so that it helps you and saves you time. Hit that like button. Please subscribe. It makes all the difference to a small creator like myself. Really look forward to seeing you in the next video. I'll see you then, guys.